If you're holding 18,775 XDC right now, you're probably asking yourself what this stack could look like by 2026. At today's price of around 8 cents, that bag is worth roughly $1,502. Not bad, but the real reason people are interested in XDC isn't the current value, it's the potential. This is a project that's trying to reshape one of the most overlooked but valuable sectors in the world, global trade finance. And if XDC can capture even a small share of this trillion-dollar market, your 18,775 tokens could be worth much more in just a couple of years. But before we break it all down, a quick note. If you're trading crypto and want an exchange that actually works for real traders, I recommend WEEX. It's got deep liquidity, ultra-low fees, and access to a huge range of coins. You can even trade with up to 400x leverage. Right now, you can claim up to $30,000 in sign-up bonuses, and there's no KYC required. Check the link in the description to grab your bonus today. Now let's get into XDC. At the time of recording, XDC has a market cap of about $1.3 billion, which places it firmly in the mid-cap category. It's not tiny and obscure, but it's also not anywhere near the giants of the top 20. That makes it a sweet spot for investors who believe in growth. There's still room to run without being a moonshot gamble. With over 16 billion tokens circulating, its tokenomics are fairly straightforward, and your 18,775 tokens represent a decent position if the network grows into what it's aiming to be. So, what makes XDC different? Unlike projects chasing retail hype through NFTs or meme-driven ecosystems, XDC is building quietly in the background with a very specific target: trade finance and cross-border settlement. For decades, this industry has been plagued by inefficiency. Transactions often take days, documents are still paper-based, and processes are costly and error-prone. The World Trade Organization has said the trade financing gap is in the trillions, and that inefficiency keeps businesses, especially in emerging markets, from accessing needed capital. XDC's approach is to digitize and tokenize these processes. It's a hybrid blockchain, which means it can handle both public and private transactions. That's a key feature when dealing with institutions that need privacy but also want transparency and verifiability. It's also EVM compatible, which lowers the barrier for developers to build applications on it. But the big story here is partnerships and adoption. The XDC network is already involved with the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative, a global consortium that includes banks, asset managers, and fintechs working to digitize trade assets. It's also tied to the International Trade and Forfeiting Association, which helps set standards for global trade finance. This isn't hype. This is actual integration with the players that matter. And we've already seen tokenization in action on XDC. TradeTech, a major player in this space, has used XDC to tokenize trade finance assets, turning things like receivables into blockchain-based securities that can be traded more efficiently. Even more impressively, XDC has seen bond issuances worth tens of millions settled on its chain. And recently, there have been pilots for tokenized U.S. Treasury products running on XDC. When institutions start testing government-backed assets on a blockchain, that's a strong sign of credibility. This positions XDC as one of the only networks with a real-world use case beyond speculation. So what does this mean for your 18,775 tokens? Let's map out some scenarios. At 10 cents, your bag would be worth $1,877. At 25 cents, you're looking at $4,693. At 50 cents, you'd be sitting on $9,387. At $1, the value climbs to $18,775. Push it to $2, and suddenly you're holding $37,550. And in a more ambitious scenario, where XDC breaks through to $5, your 18,775 tokens would be worth an incredible $93,875. Now, those numbers sound exciting, but let's put them into perspective with market cap math. At 50 cents, XDC would have a market cap of around $8 billion. Very doable if adoption grows. At $1, we're talking about a $16 billion market cap, which would put it in the company of some of today's most established projects. At $2, that jumps to $32 billion, and at $5, around $80 billion. Those levels are ambitious but not impossible, especially if XDC secures its niche in tokenized trade finance. Of course, no project is without risks. One of the biggest challenges for XDC is the slow pace of institutional adoption. Banks and trade organizations don't move quickly, And even though legal frameworks like the model law on electronic transferable records are starting to be adopted worldwide, it takes years for new systems to become standard. So while the fundamentals are strong, the timeline could stretch longer than most retail investors are used to. There's also competition. Projects like Stellar, Algorand, and Hedera are also targeting institutional markets, and each brings unique strengths. Ripple, despite its battles with regulators, is still pushing into cross-border payments, and its presence is hard to ignore. For XDC to win, it needs to stay ahead in trade finance specifically, carving out a space that others don't dominate. And then, there's the issue of awareness. XDC isn't listed on every major exchange yet, and it doesn't have the marketing push of more popular coins. That lack of visibility can slow retail inflows, especially in bull markets when new investors chase whatever is trending. The good news is that XDC's strategy doesn't rely on hype. It's about institutional adoption. But the bad news is that adoption isn't as visible or exciting to the average crypto trader, which can keep its price suppressed until major news breaks. The flip side, though, is that XDC has already proven itself in real-world use cases. It's not a white paper dream. Tokenized assets are already live, bonds have already been issued, and trade finance is already being piloted. That makes it one of the most grounded plays in the space. It's not trying to reinvent finance with a flashy buzzword. It's trying to fix a system that desperately needs fixing, and it's doing it with backing from real institutions. By 2026, a reasonable expectation is that XDC could reach somewhere between 25 cents and $1, which would make your 18,775 tokens worth between $4,693 and $18,775. In a stronger growth scenario, $2 is possible, pushing your bag up to $37,550. And in the most bullish case, where trade tokenization takes off in a big way, and XDC becomes a dominant network in that niche, your holdings could be worth close to $93,875 at $5. The path to those targets won't be fast or smooth. Adoption will come slowly, regulations will evolve, and competition will remain fierce. But the upside for patient holders is that XDC is one of the few blockchains aiming squarely at an industry with trillions in value waiting to be unlocked. If it succeeds, the payoff could be massive. So the real question isn't just how much your 18,775 XDC will be worth by 2026. It's whether you're willing to hold through the noise, ignore the lack of hype, and bet on one of the few crypto projects with real-world adoption already underway. Because if XDC continues on its current trajectory, this could be one of the most underappreciated plays in the entire market.